when we talk about sampling systems, whether it's a liquid or gas sampling system, sample that you take, for the sample systems, we say that it needs to be safe. Safety first, right? So it needs to be safe, and at the same time, it comes hand in hand. Where for the system to be safe, it needs to be foolproof. You do not want to encourage operator errors or non-clear instructions on how to operate a sample system. And also, at the same time, a sample system needs to be easy to maintain. There's no point of having such a good sampling system when you require some form of maintenance, and it is hard to maintain because it's not properly designed. It was just designed to install, but not designed to be easily maintainable. Now, for samples, we talk about the three ethos of having a good sample system. Your samples that arrive to your analyzers needs to be representative, which means to say that whatever you are sampling at your analyzer needs to be exactly the same that's actually in the process. If it's not representative, the sample system or the analyzer is just simply not doing its job. Secondly, samples need to be timely, right? Typically in a sampling system or online sampling system, we have something what we call the transport time or a time delay or a response time. So sample systems needs to perform under these specific parameters where it needs to respond typically within a minute or so. So you do not want an online analyzer to have samples arriving after a couple of hours, because that just means that you are missing the boat. You don't have a chance to adjust your processes, and basically that is just telling you history. It's not really telling you what's happening at the moment, which is not the point of an online analyzer. Thirdly, samples needs to be compatible with analyzers. Now, because analyzers have a very specific set of needs, it needs to be sampled under a certain fixed condition. It needs to be under a certain temperature, a certain pressure. It needs to be. This is what we mean by the sample needs to be compatible for your analyzer. Just to roll back one more step, a little bit talking about the sample systems. Typically, sample systems, people just look at the panel that's right before the analyzer and calls that a sample system or sample preconditioning system. But in reality, a sample system consists of the very start where you start to tap it at the process pipeline. So we call it a sample extraction. So when you sample over here, this is where your sampling system starts, and everything underneath here is your sample system. That means your field station, your fast loop, all the way down to your sample disposal is part of a sampling system. So when we start from the very start, we have a sample extraction where Swagelab actually does have a range of products. We're talking whether it's a process piping valve, or interface valve, or what we refer to here as double block and bleed valves. They come in probes, and they come also in retractable probes. So you can see because of this, there's no one right design or one right way to sample. It really depends on the application. The second component of a sample system typically is what we call a field station. Some do refer to that as a field preconditioning system. But in this example here, and in this case, you could see it's just a regulator to step the pressure down. Normally, you would see this in gas systems, but not really in liquid. But this is part of the sampling system. And normally, this is remotely at where you tap the point at site. Then you have what we call a fast loop, typically with long transport lines. To improve that time or response time, customers do put in fast loops so that they can actually enhance the response time of your sampling system. As you can see here, there are many different other designs that we use in a fast loop, but we shall not go that in depth today about that. Then we have what we call a stream selector system, or stream switching, where if in any case where the customer would like to analyze multiple streams using one analyzer, they would have a switching system that looks something like this. Of course, the best practice is, of course, to have one sample to have one analyzer. But even so, all these analyzers will need a second stream, typically to calibrate the analyzer at a certain set interval. So you will do have some form of stream selection over here. And then we arrive to the topic of the day. Today, we'll be talking about a little bit about grab sampling. So grab sampling typically sits at the end of the fast loop, as near as possible to the analyzer, so that you could do your correlation checking between the results that you get. But we typically have two major types of design or principle of sampling for grab sampling. One, of course, being gas and the other being liquid. For grab sampling, for gas and liquid, they basically have two different kinds of way of sampling, right? So for liquids, we typically need to sample a sample cylinder from the bottom up. The reason simply is because that if when you sample it from bottom up in this direction, you actually allow gas or any gas that's in the sample cylinder to be flushed out, right? You cannot do that if you were to sample from the top down, right? So you could also have an option here where you have what you call an outage tube to be added into the sample cylinder so that you maintain a certain what we call a vapor space over here. The function of this is because for volatile liquids, you do have some expansion when you take this take this offsite when you start to sample and you take it out. This has a potential to expand, so that's why you do have some form of vapor space here for expansion. Now for gas, it is the mirror opposite. You could see that instead of sampling from bottom up, now you do from top down. The reason is because when you do such a thing, you leave chances for the liquid to condensate to be flushed out together when you do the sampling, right? And this is actually mirrored here in our Swagelok grab sampling panels that you can see. So one thing that you can automatically see over here, they are mirror images of each other. You do have a hose here on the return line and the hose here on the return line. So this is gas, so it samples from top down, and liquid, so bottom up. This is an example of a grab sample system where traditionally this has always been the design that we put on site. So this sample system that you see over here is still sampling from bottom up. Good idea. That is a good sampling design, but herein lies one of the problems. Because this design was probably in 2015, so about 5 years ago, and we still see plenty of it today, even new ones. Now, the problem that we face here is that you could see that if you were the operator, it could be very daunting to take a sample. Why? It's because if you see over here, this is actually the instructions to sample, right? So firstly, when we do sampling, we need to, say supposing now in this picture, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 valves to operate, to grab a liquid sample from here. So the operator at site, when he goes there, he needs to do step 1, they need to operate this valve, close this valve, close that valve, open that valve. Step 2, close that valve, open this valve, close that valve, open that valve. Step 3, close this valve, open that valve, right? So you could see that it could be confusing for the operator to grab a sample. And, in reality, when they grab sample, they are not just grab sampling at one point. Perhaps they are taking samples at various different points simultaneously. And if the operator is not paying attention to what they do, or they get interrupted, or they get distracted, they don't know what procedure they are at it, there's a potential here that if they don't know what step they are in, they may have taken the wrong step. They may not do the right thing. Best case scenario is, they just retake the sample, but there's a potential here for a safety issue. Now, if you look at Swagelok's grab sampling, the offerings that we have consolidated all this valve into a single valve over here, right? So now, instead of operating so many valves, now the operator will be clear what they are doing. I'll give you an example in a short while later. So this is what we mean by safe operations and it being foolproof. You don't need to second guess what mode you're in when you sample, and everything is clearly labeled over here with a single valve operation.